It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
I actually have notes this week. I have notes on what I want to say, and I was trying to think of the best way to open this that would throw Mark off his game, because somehow, for as weird as our topics normally are, somehow as I was mixing, not last week's, but the weeks before show, I was laughing yet again at how just perplexed you were that I was talking about superglue. But that's, superglue is a part of everyday life. And my actual thought was maybe I should open this one telling a story from tech. There we are, just with, those magnet things that people have that stick in the back of their phones, like they kind of hold their phones. It's just like you get the little thing that keeps the phone in your hand type of thing. So we got one of those magnets. We've got ribbon and hangers that were kind of conned out of a poor dry cleaner lady's dry cleaning business in a Chicago metro center, trying to get a pair of what do they call the earbud things for the iPhones stuff? iPods, iPad. What are the earbuds? You know what I'm talking about, like the little
AirPods.
AirPods. Okay, yeah. Trying to get some AirPods that fell in a fenced-in area down in the middle of a metro center in Chicago. I can't get through the turnstile because my ticket doesn't work, and I'm having to have the MTA guy kind of like get me through. And then I hear the crowd erupt from the stairwell. You hear this like, yeah, no, as the AirPods dropped yet again. So that was one of the most memorable stories we had in Chicago last week. But anyway, that
was one of the most memorable stories you have. I don't know what went on in PHP Tech then.
It was fun. Trying to fish some of those AirPods out. Is all fenced in. You couldn't get to it, so there's a magnet on the end of a ribbon that's swinging back and forth. Trying to get magnet gets the. I think they got the ear. The one of them just fell. One of them in the box. The other one was still in his pocket. I think they got it once. Brought it up. That was the excited, collective reaction. And then the magnet slams against the stairwell as it gets close and drops it again. And that was and then after that happens, I see one of the devs on our team just walk across from that stairwell up to the other, just to be like, I'm going to distance myself from this group, because when they're arrested, I don't also want to be arrested. So
that's probably what I would have done. I would just let you be. Yep.
It's been 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Mark.
It's been too long, Tim.
And I don't know what's going on. Like,
I missed you. I had both my Dev Friday withdrawal and my Tim withdrawal. So
a little bit of both, huh?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Which is the same thing, because if it's not apparent from the quality of the show, we don't talk outside of it. This is just pretty much the time that we have. Well, I mean, we go back and forth on social media.
Well, that's true. And we definitely enjoy doing that. And, and if you are following us on the social media, probably will see that I'm trying to drag you into some other things this summer. So
I was going to say, and you have Twitch now. Like I got a question about Twitch, trying to start a different podcast along with, are you trying to do everything? Is that your goal for finding this job? Is just, if you do everything, you'll find a new job? Right. Is that the idea?
I have to get myself out there. I want to be as public as possible. Remember a couple of years ago when I tried to be as private as possible? I'm trying to go the other way.
It feels like that. It feels like that a little bit. Oh, when I got back from tech, so I flew out of Chicago Saturday morning early because I was going to a friend's wedding. So fly into to Philadelphia 10:30, drive to the wedding, get there right before it starts. We're at the wedding. Things are happening. Bubbles are being blown. Whatever. And a friend of mine from years ago comes up and he's like, I really like listening to your Dev Friday. And I'm like,
really?
The listener. We have the non-Australian listener,
our super fan.
So I met a listener. So apparently there's one person. I know you won't look at the stats. I'm actually curious. I know you won't look at the stats.
Well, at some point I will, because like I said, I have some plans for what I want to do with the show.
Okay. With this show?
I don't know. Yes.
We have no plans for this show.
I do have plans for this show for the summer. So I think at some point I will look at the stats. Well, and to kind of see where we are with that, to set a baseline and to see how we can increase those
specifically
over the summer.
our Australian listeners.
Yes, because I'm not trying to 10x myself, Tim. I'm trying to 10x the show.
Is that what it is?
That's right.
That what it is? Because this is what was that? That was the quest to become a 10x developer. That's the summer of Mark.
I think the secret is you just have to go 10x life. You just have to go everything.
Everything. Everything just go 10 times the speed.
Don't hold back.
How's that working out?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Still the
All
start
right.
of the summer, so we'll see how it goes.
I see what we've got for those of you who are watching. By the way, it's always better once we mix it down, right? What is it? DevFridayShow.com. Is that where you find all your?
That's correct.
And then you can. I'm sure there's if you've got a podcasty type app you use, I'm sure you can find us there. We're listed on the index. So subscribe to the audio. That's a much better sounding show. But if you happen to be watching the live stream, you'll see that Mark has apparently fired up his green screen once again.
That's right. So, like I said, I have some streaming plans, so I'm starting
to
some
things up here.
Starting to kind of practice my streaming again. So I'm going to be doing that too, which I think we'll talk about that more next week. You know this week I do want to kind of get caught up on your adventures at PHP Tech, and we could kind of also talk about some of the other things that have been happening with the other tech conferences.
Well, yeah, you ended. I don't know if it was in the after show. If you do watch the live streams or the recordings of the live streams, sometimes we go a little bit long after the end bumper and say a couple of things. You were disappointed, I guess, at how non-developer-y Google I/O has now become. Is that a fair assessment?
It felt like an Apple conference.
Right, because Apple's conference
nice and polished, very marketing focused.
Does Apple still call their conference like it has the title is somewhat developer focused, right? Like this is it's the Apple Developer Conference or something like that. Is it still?
Well, actually, I think it's happening
WWDC,
next
right? Or
week.
Something like that?
Yeah, it's WWDC. I think they still. I don't know.
What
do they still use that? They still use acronym. I don't know. I don't watch it as much because I don't do much.
Worldwide Developer Conference, right?
From the iOS perspective, so I don't watch it as much. I used to be a little bit more into that.
But you're saying that, yeah, okay. So Worldwide Developer Conference is what it's called, but really, it's just Apple's way to showcase their new products.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not developers that just watch it; it's everybody because they want to see what's in the new iPhone, what's in the new hardware. So
now, if you watch the latest Google I/O, it will feel like a WWDC where there's a very big marketing event. And honestly, I can understand why Google is going this approach.
Far less developer focused, far more product,
because they know they're broadcasting this to the world, so everybody's watching. And from Google's perspective too, they had a lot to show in a sense where. Since Microsoft bought out ChatGPT and they were taking all the credit for that and revolutionizing the AI world, Google had to do a little catch up there. So if you watch the Google I/O, is pretty much just nonstop AI. So that is a question
It is hard to understate how incredibly good Bard is. I think we tested that last week, right?
I've actually been using Bard a little bit more.
I took some quotes from Mark.
Yeah,
it was not a fair fight. I think as we ended the show, I think I did it, and I had just given Bard a link, and I think that Bard couldn't follow the link, so it was just throwing out random insults. But then I gave it the actual text from Mark, and it did absolutely no better. It was still terrible at coming up with any type of reply. But you're saying when it comes to code, it's a little bit better because what I found with Bard is Bard has given me immensely detailed, very detailed, completely wrong information. Like when I ask it about things I know about, it tells me things that are completely fabricated. I'm like, how are you even coming up with this?
No, from a coding perspective, the more I've used ChatGPT and now use a little bit more Bard because since it seems like Google has improved that, and I didn't want to pay for ChatGPT anymore, so I've been using a little bit of both. Yeah, from a coding perspective, I still it falls definitely to fall down at a certain point, especially the more domain, ChatGPT and Bard when it comes to once you start doing more domain specific problems for your applications, or let's say just harder things that aren't let's say as more commonly known in a sense, so that would be like the things that are, let's say, in 100 different open source code repositories, those common algorithms or let's say methods that are used over and over again. Yes, ChatGPT and Bard, that does a great job rehashing those and explaining those. But once you start copy pasting code into it, say, okay, explain this code to it. Okay, it can do that. It can kind of talk about the parts of it. But then if you start having problems with saying, okay, I'm having this error message that's coming through the console, pasting the error message, pasting the code, it starts to give you some really kind of weird suggestions. And I do like how Bard is a little bit less sure of itself than ChatGPT is. Because
Right.
ChatGPT is
It
saying,
gives
"Oh,
up a
this
little
is the
bit easier.
solution. This will work. You should be your problem should be resolved now." And ChatGPT says, "Oh, well, use this code with caution. It may or may not work, but it does
Has a large
it has
language
a little bit
model.
of it does a little bit of a good effort in regards to giving you a solution." So I don't know. I have been using it less for solving coding problems, but just still for just generating ideas or kind of working through something you may have in your head that
Yeah.
you would usually just Google and just search and trying to find some articles and some websites. Just like what I was thinking about. This is something I want to talk about next week. Like I was alluding to that. This week I do want to keep
We
talking
don't
about.
plan these things.
I do no, but I'm trying to plan ahead. That's I'm trying to.
This is gonna destroy the entire DNA
It probably
of this
will.
podcast if we have planning.
Because I do want to kind of, do want to do the tech conference recap. But what I want to do next week, though, I'm thinking about laying on my master plan for the summer.
The summer of Mark.
The summer of Mark, the summer of the 10Xing, the summer of leveling up my life. I'm planning on laying out the master plan with you.
Oh, this is gonna be interesting. Week. Well, I'm gonna need to hit up Fiverr, and we're gonna have to get a new a little stinger for that, like 2023 summer of Mark. We'll have something that comes and we'll do.
So
updates.
One of the questions I was thinking about with Bard, because I was asking my wife, because I'm actually going to be talking to a recruiter today. That's actually after we get done
recruiter?
Yes. Well, we'll talk more about that next week. But that got me thinking about, because I was kind of thinking about, what's some things that are going to come up during that, and areas I may want to relocate, or we may want to relocate for work around, that we may want to move to.
Bard?
So what I was talking to my wife about, I was like, all right, so where are some just general areas that we both would agree on? So we had a conversation about that last night. And then what I did with Bard, that I was curious, okay, based on these different areas, which are the tech companies, or which are the companies
doing
that
some research that way.
Just kind of think about which are the, let's say, not the largest tech companies, but let's say the tech companies that focus in on the tech that I like, or that I want to specialize in, or that I want to find a job in.
That are in that area.
Yeah, that are in the specific areas. And it actually gave me some good ideas, some interesting kind of things to think about. So I still use it for that, for some.
My perspective is, I don't know that I ever want to work for a company that would want me to show up in a building again.
Okay, well, that's another
conversation.
Truth, right? Yes.
Yeah, it's just the truth. I tend to like working remotely.
And it seems like what you read online, everybody does. I feel like, I don't know. I've gone the other way with that. I kind of feel like I do need an office in some way.
You want the water cooler?
I'm not saying I need to be in the office, let's say 5 days a week. I do think there's the hybrid approach. I think the hybrid approach for me works best to kind of think about, what are those 2-3 days that work best to kind of be in the office, to kind of meet and have face-to-face meetings. And what would be the 2-3 days that you would it's better just to work from home, you could get more done, especially if you're just working through a project and coding, and you're definitely more productive that way. But I do think the collaborative nature of being in an office with other people, I don't know, I miss that.
It can be for companies that haven't done it before. I think it can be difficult to learn how to achieve that collaboration. But for companies that I think start out completely remote, like we did, I feel like,
and it's
a little bit easier to be like, oh yeah, for us collaborating in real time over either async things like chat, or let's jump into a video call real quick. And that tooling is only getting better, right? Was it great to be in person with the rest of the dev team? Yeah, that was great. Is that something that is needed continually for us to be productive? I don't think so. I think we can be productive where we are. And I think we can be, what do I want to say, more sustainably productive for the long term. Right? Because there is, and this is something that I've mentioned in the past, but like my perspective as I look at team dynamic, it's not just, we lost a good developer when someone says, hey, I got to take a break for a while, I'm going to go somewhere else, right? It's the fact that the team knows how to work with that person, right? It's not just like, now we need another developer with that same level of experience or seniority or understanding of our code base. Yeah, that's all important too. But also, you have, as a team, you've understood how to work and collaborate with that person. So someone walking away, and you can't tell me that a lot of the companies that are very much in person also have, I think, a higher turnover rate. So they may be more productive, but because they're in person, they also may need to be in person because their turnover rate is higher, and they need that additional, say, oh yeah, we're in the same room, because we don't know how to work together well yet. And if you can foster a longer term sustainable team, I think you can do that remotely and do it.
Well, recently
and do it
everybody's turnover
sustainably.
rate's pretty high right now. If you the
Well,
layoffs still flowing, so
that's true. That's true. But that, not across the board. But that is true.
I don't know. It's interesting. I think also just going back to my personality, because I think I do know my limits of when I'm by myself too much. Even when I'm just like with you, if I'm just with you, kind of chat with you once a week or chat with other people online, then that does fill a social kind of requirement that I have. But I think I do find myself, and I try to feel like where am I at on the spectrum of being introvert to extrovert? I do
Right.
feel I do lean more into the extroverted, because if you do get, let's say, energy or get, positive feedback, or just you feel better by being with other people, I do feel I lean more into that than I do the introverted. My wife would say that she's the opposite, but she started off as an extrovert. She thought she was extrovert. As she got older, then she realized she was more of an introvert. She got to pull it away a little bit more from, like, not needing to be face to face with so many people as she, used to, let's say, early in her career. And I find I've kind of maybe gone the opposite, where I think initially I probably was a little bit more of an introvert. Now I'm actually feeling a little bit more comfortable or a little bit more happy, I guess, when I'm out there. But I don't want to be out there all the time too. Yeah, because I do think, from a working perspective, working, alone, especially when you're trying to work through a problem or a project, unless you're doing something like a co-programming or some type of collaborative thing where you have to work side by side with somebody on a task. But I find, I do find that there are times I like to be by myself and to code and to work through what I'm trying to work through at the time. But then when I want to kind of brainstorm, come up with some ideas, work through some problem sets with other people, the developers, I think there's a lot of value in that. Do face to face.
But that's the thing, you can do that. You can do that remotely too. Like it's can be nice just to be able to pull somebody into a quick meeting because you happen to be in the same office. But it's also not really that hard to say, let's jump into a Zoom meeting. I mean, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. It's like, hey, take a look at this code with me. Help me figure this out. And yep, we do it. And then, all right, we're gonna break again. And none of us had to actually relocate.
Which it will be interesting to see, like, especially if I am able to visit any offices this summer, and kind of see how people are working. Because what I've been reading about, and this is mainly, I don't know, maybe from one perspective, is that companies want, especially the larger companies, want employees to come back to the office. They're trying to encourage them as much as possible, or laying them off. But so they're really trying to push for that. But then
two things.
But what people are still finding, though, they'll get them back in the office. But then what are they spending most of their time on?
Exactly.
Like in Zoom sessions.
Right. Like with other
people in the same office.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So I do. That's. I don't know. That could be something I'm worried about. Like, this design of going back to the glory days of working with other people in the same room against a whiteboard and working through some issues. That's kind of my dreams, or what I want to get back to. But then if I'm just going to go sit at a desk and be on a Zoom session anyway, then I'm going to be real like, what the heck? Can we do this from home?
There you go. We'll see how quick that. We'll see how quickly that develops. The one thing I wanted to mention, like you talk about Bard and GPT, like the one thing that I was really hopeful they'd be able to do is understand more code. Like you said, you give it code and explain this to me, and maybe it can, but it's much better, it seems, with things that are very much known problems. Like this is a highly understandable either behavior pattern, whatever. If you just say, like, give it this code and explain to me what it does, it's, in my experience, not that great at it. I mean, if you're throwing it a web controller, it's going to know what that does because there's tons of example. But if it's novel and new, understanding what it did, I found it falls very, very short. And I was so hopeful that it would. I was so hopeful, like, you could point it at new code and be like, hey, explain this like I'm 5, right? Like, almost generate some external documents from something that I just wrote, so I don't have to do that, because you can understand it and kind of explain what this code is doing. I found that it's not really great at that. At all. And then a lot of the posts that you'd see, like, hey, I built this game just using ChatGPT and JavaScript. It's the future. We don't need developers. Well, yeah, but the game you built was pretty much example code that's documented somewhere. And there's a tutorial that walks you through you writing the game. So you just had a computer pull out the tutorial and write it for you. And
Yeah.
then when you said change a couple of variables, yeah, it just changed the variables for you. It's not going to generate the code that is complex. It's not going to generate the things that aren't already example code, at least based on my experience. And I have exercised it a little bit. I think, I need to, I don't know that I followed up with one person on our team. Speaking of tech, since we were, while we were at PHP Tech, one night we ran a battle snake competition where, again, it's like Nibbles from years ago. The only difference is it's a bunch of API requests, and you are saying when you get an inbound API request, here's the board with all the positions of everything. Where do you want your snake to move? So you have to, I mean, at that point, it's like, well, figure it out, right? Like, is simple algorithm just avoids everything? Or do you actually factor in, I need some energy because I'm almost out of life. I need to go after the food. But if I go after the food, I can make myself longer. There's snakes in the way, all the stuff that you can do to try to make your snake survive that battle. I believe he tried to have ChatGPT write the snake for him.
Oh, really?
So it was Snake GPT. And I believe he was very frustrated at the process.
Was he just setting up the parameters with ChatGPT, or because I do the one interesting thing that was released over the past month or so, you probably heard about the auto ChatGPT.
Auto ChatGPT. No.
That one developer made this Python. If you go and go GitHub, I think it's I always say Google GitHub. That is completely wrong. You go to
Microsoft GitHub.
I don't know why, because they both start with G. I think that's
yeah.
But if you go look up a repository on GitHub that for like this auto GPT,
okay,
and it's basically like a Python program. I took a look at it. It's actually kind of interesting, where it basically just has preset prompts that are configured within it to basically expect prompts to come back and then to give like an automatic reply. So if you wanted to have it to automate a process, and if that process can fit within,
ChatGPT.
Yes, with ChatGPT to kind of call, so if you want to ask it a question and to kind of start off a process and then have the auto GPT just listen for the response back and then give a prompt back to it in order to accomplish a certain task.
All right, I think you're taking the far different direction, because I'm pretty sure he tried to have it program the code.
So that's what I did, because I do think that could be kind of interesting. So if you, for the game aspect of that, if you could know the prompts know the response to come back, and then also program some other prompts to give back to it and have that automated, that could be something interesting, especially if you're going to configure it for a game. Yeah,
that's because I feel like he had the same issue that you were talking about in the last show, where you said you just got frustrated because you're fighting with it too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he had the same issue fighting with it to try to get code that worked and all that. But if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, almost wire it up to say, hey, ChatGPT, here is a textual representation of the board. What direction should I go? And if you give it some of those first prompts to explain, this is my snake, this is how life works, in terms of I need to get new food every 100 moves or whatever. This is what's going to happen if there's a headline collision. You give it the rule set, and then just say, given this board, what do I do? It'd be interesting, because I know there's a 500 millisecond timeout. So you got half a second. I don't know if ChatGPT is fast enough.
Probably not.
But it's really interesting to be able to leverage that, because the other thought that came to my mind is, well, you could run a bunch of simulations and have AI learn, right? You could build what is essentially a model of snake games, and then just ask the model, what's the best next move?
Yeah.
And I think if you were working with OpenAI, you could probably figure out.
And I do think it'll be interesting in the future, because one thing that Google released was the I'm not sure what it's called. It actually has a name. I probably should look this up for the show, but it was because I was talking to my wife about, because I think for her work with her books and her writing, this could actually be a really cool tool for her. She could upload all of her books as Google Docs. They create like a private AI or a private model based on her content. So if she wanted to, let's say, have a Bard or whatever version of Bard that uses this, that could just generate, let's say, social media posts about her characters, or maybe even to come up with ideas, like story ideas around, let's say, if she wrote 10 books, which she did, she could upload all of her books and then have a model based around those books, and then to give more accurate responses that she's looking for. It could work really, really well. So I think in the future, when it comes to code,
you're talking about training it, right?
Yeah, training on like your own private repositories.
So I gave it I gave it some data about my talks beforehand. I'm like, hey, generate me some social media posts, and they were terrible. Not great. Like it's like this. It's so, I don't know. It felt like so generated. Felt like so. You're guessing. There's no feel. But I think you're like if you could train it, just like I want to do on the art side of things, right? If I could train it with the style artwork that I use, then I wouldn't have to. I could just describe some of the illustrations I want, and hopefully get closer than what happens now, which is I get something that's close to what I describe, but it's not in the style that's consistent. And I know, I mean, on that side, yeah, there's been tons of work done on how to train the generative AI on how to generate images in a particular style. But I think feeding it, like you said, feeding it data would be very. Did you read the article about the guy who generated like, I don't know, 100, 200, some ridiculous amount of short stories?
No.
Like a science fiction short story thing.
Okay.
Collaborating with, I mean, it's not like he's hiding it. He's pretty open about it.
Yeah.
Right. Collaborating with ChatGPT to build the storylines, to brainstorm around it, and almost to, I think at some point, I don't know what technique he used to do this, but to connect them. Right. So you can read the story in a vacuum, but also know that, it kind of brings in some elements from this other story that's in a similar science fiction style. Used ChatGPT to write them. I think they were, I want to say, in the neighborhood of 5,000 words, something like that. So you're talking about short stories. But then also generated the artwork with either, I don't know if it's Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, something, generate the artwork as well, and published them. I'm guessing mostly ebooks for like $1, $2 a piece, right? And so that human assisted creativity thing, it's not like it's all generated from ChatGPT, but as you start to get it to learn and understand as much as it can, and as much as we can train it, which I think we're going to see more and more tooling for training. We're going to see more and more of that, where it's creativity that's AI assisted,
or we could just see a lot more garbage,
or that too. I had it. My
like the internet already has so much garbage in it, and this is just going to make it more exponential.
So I wonder about that. I had to put together a job description for a summer internship.
Ooh.
Right. It's like we need a piece of paper that seems like it's a job description. Because
so what kind of mini Tim are you looking for?
Nah, it's not a mini Tim thing. But we wanted. So it's like,
I'm curious. Yeah. What's the intern? What's the job?
I had 6 bullet points of like, here's things that this intern's going to do. Work with the engineering manager on various projects that are like development lifecycle automation, documentation improvements, behavior-driven testing, like some of the goals that I know we have. And all right, you might be involved with that, because what I don't want to intern that you're like, hey, here's this project, and then come back in 2 months, you're like, oh, thanks for that, and bye. To me, the value is get embedded in the team, work with the team, understanding how the team works, because that's going to benefit the intern. You see how an actual software development team works, right? It's going to benefit us in that, well, maybe you want to work for us later. Okay, that'd be great too if that all works out. And actually assist the team with something that's useful and not just some side project that was busy work. So I don't want that at all. So is that, work with the engineering manager on that, and then work with various developers in the team, joining architecture sessions, pairing on specific tasks, whether they're architectural or development. And I was like, so that's it. We've got like 7 lines here. That's not a page that somebody wants to see. Like they don't want to see that as well. Here's the official job description as part of this cover letter, whatever it all was. So I was just like, hey, here's a set of responsibilities. Can you generate me a job description for a summer internship? Boom. Like 1-page document there. I just had to be like, okay, yeah, this is some things you have to change in there because they just use some standard boilerplate stuff, and then it's done.
Yeah, I think that is that's where it shines. Like you
but
just
give
it like a list, and then you have generate some copy from that list. Oh, that works really
the
nice.
Thing that not bothers me, but the thing that like kind of tickles right the back of your mind, you're like, this isn't quite right. Everything I needed to communicate, I could do in those 8 lines. Right? That was what needed to be communicated. Here's your responsibilities. All it did was take those and structure them as a couple sentences that said, here's the summer internship is going to include this. And then it said the responsibilities will include, and it was each bullet point just made a little bit more verbose. So did I take what was the actual value of communication and I hid it. I diluted it intentionally because that's what we as a society expect. And is that good? Is that good? Because it goes to like what you're saying. There's so much already out there. Are we just going to generate not necessarily more garbage, but are we just going to fluff it all up? Are we just going to take up more space in terms of our communication because we've fed it through an AI to sound better? And it's like, well, really at the end, this is what I wanted to communicate. Why did we take away this high value communication where the value's boom, right there, immediate, I see it. That's all that needed to be communicated. And then instead we said, well, because for it to really look right, it needs to be on a full page and it needs to have all this fluff wording around it. Does it?
Has to have a nice aesthetic to it.
I guess. Like that's the thing. That's the thing. So is your wife gonna start generating stories? That's the next part.
She loves ChatGPT for social media.
For generating the post. Yeah.
Yes, because she's really great at long form. Like she can pump out a 400-page book, in no time at all. But then for her to write like a social media post about her books,
then it's like can't do this.
It's super challenging. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So that's what she does. She takes like say segments of her like paragraphs of her book, kind of plugs it in, and then generates some ads or some copy around that.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. I took my daughter has to write a 2,500-page research paper every year for school.
Well, she can easily do that now.
Yeah, she can. Yeah, obviously, just ChatGPT generate me. Like I want to see the research paper that starts out with as a large language model. Like that's the first slide. As a large language model, I have done this research for you. Thanks for that. I don't know. This is a side, right? Like if you can generate a research paper using AI and it not be obviously generated by AI, maybe who cares? Maybe you've learned something. Maybe you picked up a different skill. But anyway, we took her 2,500-page research paper about the Roman Empire. And my wife was like, now I've got to grade this thing. Because for some of her English, we have a grading service where an English teacher grades it. This is outside of that course because this is for those who want the inside baseball on how homeschooling works in Pennsylvania. You can get like if you just do what is required by the state, I think you get a high school diploma that is the equivalent of a GED. It's just like, yep, you've got a diploma. But you can also go to specific diploma programs that then say we have additional, not just the state minimum requirements, we have additional requirements, and you will get a diploma from our, I don't know what it technically, institution, group, whatever. So the one that she works with requires this 2,500-page research paper every year for English. It is not the same as her English curriculum. So her English curriculum had her do a research paper that was graded by a teacher. That's part of the the service that we use for her English. This being an additional requirement was not going to be graded by that grader. So it was actually a longer version of the one that she had graded. But it's like, my wife was looking, and she's like, now I got to read this and grade it, mark it. I was like, how about we don't? How about I just paste that into ChatGPT? So I said, I'm going to paste in. It's going to be big, so I'm going to have to do it in sections because it was longer than 2,500 words. I said, I'm going to paste this in. I want you to grade it and find any grammar, punctuation errors, and that type of thing. So I pasted it in a couple parts, put in this works cited at the end, and it gave her a grade. That was not really far. Yeah, it was not far off of what grade her other report got.
Did you Did you put in like a rubric for the grade?
I did not. No,
that's interesting. I never even thought about doing that. Thinking, okay, here's
I was wondering if
one-page paper. I didn't.
If you've played with that, because I mean, your stuff is going to be a little bit different to grade, obviously.
Yeah, my wife in her classes, she deals with papers. I don't. I just deal with projects that. But unless it's like a proposal for projects, then sometimes. But usually those are just graded pass fail, and I give feedback, but I don't really give like a letter grade.
And that's the what do I want to say? That's where like you could paste it some of your code, but then we already talked about that, right? It didn't work all that great,
I wouldn't. Yeah.
So I said to ChatGPT, I would like to paste in a research paper and have you grade it as well as find grammar and punctuation errors. It was written by a 10th grade student. because the first time I pasted it in, ChatGPT gave it a B+ or something like that. And I
Mhm.
was like, what is this base? Because unfortunately, I didn't have the right one, so I gave the smaller one that was already graded by a teacher, and it said B+. And I'm like, what grade level were you assuming? And they're
Yeah.
like, college. I was like, no, this isn't a college essay. This is a 10th grader. Oh, then it's an A. It's like, okay, cool. And I pasted in. I said, hey, this is going to be a large paper. So I paste the content first, and we're excited. It's still, I don't know. Did they? I feel like I used to be in the past be able to give links to ChatGPT, and it would crawl and would actually go fetch them. But now it says no, it can't.
Well, Bing is just announced that they are integrating with ChatGPT. So I think I'm not sure if it's available now, but eventually it will be like soon, where it'll be using Bing. So as a search engine for ChatGPT, so when you're in
Right.
ChatGPT, it'll definitely query through Bing. So,
But like what I would have loved to do is just share the document and let it just pull the data in, but I can't.
Yeah,
I have to
yeah.
paste it in. But I pasted it in, and it. I've got to find it. Is it over here? This is what actually I think where it is. And it told me. It says evaluation summary. It demonstrates a strong understanding of the subject matter. Talks about the conclusion in terms of improvement. It spat back some grammar ones, some of which made sense apparently, some of which my wife was like, no, I don't think that's actually a grammar issue that they're. And it gave me a grade. I didn't give it a rubric or anything. Just said like, consider this as a 10th grade paper and a research paper.
So getting back to PHP Tech. So,
wow, we shifted gears there quickly.
And besides I had to get this back to actually a developer. This is a developer podcast, Tim. So I have to get this back to some developer topics.
I feel like we're developers talking about. Oh, I used a 3.5 model.
So
I used 4 models.
Besides,
anyway.
well, because you're going to get me down the academic route, and we're never going to stop that. So that's why I had to get away from this.
All right, yeah. Because now you're saying, oh, just one last thing on this though. I know because I also play with some others. There are some services out there that are tuning it towards grading.
It makes sense
because it's like, why not, right?
Yeah.
Because that's got to be mind numbing. If you have a bunch of English papers, you're like, I'm trying to read all of these, just go through and give me a baseline, like just evaluate them all and give me a synopsis of it, so then I can look at each one. Because it's gotta be like, I think of what an English teacher would do. You gotta like read it once to understand. All right, did you communicate this concept correctly? But then you gotta like read it again to be like, did you use the right grammar? Did you follow the right format? And that's gotta be so frustrating.
But then that also creates like a weird cycle where, like, teachers are already freaking out the fact that students are using these AI tools to do the writing for them,
right?
And they can use it as once teachers start to use them, well, they kind of have to admit in some levels probably that they're using AI for grading. That just gives an excuse for the students to just, oh, why don't I just use AI, because they're using AI to grade the work anyway.
And then you're just playing AI ping pong.
Yeah, so it's
I generate my paper with AI, you grade it with AI.
We're doomed. We're doomed.
The
future of our children is looks bleak, Tim.
We are doomed. So says Mark. But we also can talk about PHP Tech even.
So the one thing I wanted to ask you, and we can try to sum up here, what besides the dangling AirPods instant?
Yes.
What was the most memorable thing that came out that you thought for you, or that you thought
interesting, that
either for you or that you saw other developers that were there really took away from it or really appreciated from the event? So I know a lot of things were talked about. I was able to see the first part of your keynote. I know they had some stream issues.
There were some stream issues. Yeah.
I was online. What is, I think it was at 10 o'clock. Or 10 o'clock my time, I think.
10 o'clock your time. Right?
So I was online. I was trying that, and I was like, oh yeah, they had stream issues. I know they posted on Twitter that they were having some issues with it. I think it finally came on around like 10:15 or 9:15 your time.
Yeah.
So I think
there's no audio though, right?
No, it actually, once it came, maybe initially when it came back, it was not. But when I like logged away and like I waited like 5 or 10 minutes, I came back and tried again. Then it was online.
Gotcha. Yeah, we recovered the audio too. So
I got to see your at least a half of your keynote. And I guess, are they going to be posting it online somewhere eventually?
It will be posted online. I don't know if it'll be behind a paywall or not for the conference.
Well, it was public. I don't know why they just put the keynote.
The initial one. Yeah, the keynote was open to the public. Didn't need to go through the paywall for that. So that was streamed to the lobby. I don't know. We'll see. we'll see what they do.
So besides your keynote,
Besides the keynote,
what do you think what was kind of one of the most kind of memorable things that you'll take away from PHP Tech?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, I liked that it was good to have tech again, right? Because tech is one of those places where.
How many years did they take a break? Because I know it's
I want to say 3.
I know it's probably because of the pandemic, and also they switched owners, right? Or the
managers. There's supposed to be 2020, and that got canceled. So then there wasn't one 2020, wasn't one 2021 or 2022, and then 2023 is when it came back. And the pandemic, and then the fact that even a year afterwards, like conferences coming back was slow. So it was great. It was great to be there again, to be with the conference again. I love the fact that tech seems to be the gathering place of a lot of, what do I want to say? A lot of leaders in the community. So you can kind of catch back up with that, see where the language is going, things like that. Good conference overall. The best part for me was the fact that we were able to get most of our dev team there and have them start that relationship with the community, the ones that hadn't been engaged with the community before. Right. So the highlight for me too out of that is seeing devs. So one of the devs on our team gave their first official conference talk was at Tech. And then to hear a couple other devs say, hey, yeah, I think I'm going to submit some talks on this topic, or I think I want to next year give a talk on this. So to see them want to share more and want to get involved and because once we have to teach something, once we have to talk, that, right? Like it's that if I'm going to communicate this topic to somebody, I'm going to know it really well. And to see that desire building in the team, I think is very positive, because as a company, and I said this before, I wrote this in the post that I wrote, we're built on PHP. We want to be connected to that community. So how does a company get connected to that community? Not by being a company, right? Like none of the individual the PHP ecosystem doesn't care about us as a company, but it does care about us as individuals. So if the developers on our team are engaged with the community, then we as a company will be engaged with the community. We're going to know what's going on because our team's going to know what's going on. It's not that we just want one person out there as the liaison between our company and the rest of the PHP community. No, we want to be in the PHP community as a team. And that's valuable to the individuals. It's valuable to us as a company. So seeing kind of that, it's not just we went to a conference, but there was a lot of positive reaction to being at the conference, being in person, and not just the fact that, hey, I'm in person with the rest of my team, but this is a pretty cool community, and I think I want to get more engaged with that. That to me was the biggest win that we had, and plus the fact that there's more than a couple of people that kind of swung by and said, hey, well, this looks like a great team. So if you're ever hiring, I'd love to know about it.
Did you find that other companies did the same thing? Did you find like there were a good number of companies that sent multiple people?
Sent their whole team?
Maybe not the whole team, but let's say, I don't know, like 3 or 4.
Hard for me to gauge. I feel like there were a couple companies that may have been 1 or 2 developers and they were there. But a team that has a mid-sized dev team, like 10 or so, I don't believe I saw a lot of companies that were there with a significant amount of the developers. Usually it was like, oh yeah, 1 or 2 developers here. We both work for the same company. I don't know. In those times, I don't really have a good feel as well. How big is your team? Is it just, are you basically the 2 developers? And that's great then. Both were there. Or was it you were the 2 that went and everybody else stayed home because they either didn't want to be engaged with the community, or your company's like, no, we're only going to pay for 2 people. So I don't know. I feel like out of teams that were there, we were probably the largest group is my gut. So.
All right.
But no, tech was great. It was a great community to engage with, and I was a little concerned at how the keynote would play, because it was, it's not a technical keynote, it's more of a philosophical keynote. But the response was significant.
Well, we did a good trial run on the show here. Like I gave you a little bit of pushback.
Right. Like if that was your idea of a good trial run, that that may have been one of the things that I was concerned about. But no, it seemed to go well. Yeah. The feedback that I got for the most part was positive. So and then trying to think what else Like we had Google I/O we already talked about. Yeah, tech we already
Well,
talked about. Yeah.
what we talked about, the other question about PFG Tech.
Yeah.
Did the hypermedia come up?
Did the hypermedia come up?
Weren't you one of you? Wasn't you or one of your coworkers
No, we
doing
gave a
hypermedia
talk
talks?
we gave a talk on hypermedia.
All right. So getting back to, and you say maybe
specifically how we use
hypermedia APIs,
internal, right? Because a lot of times, like hypermedia is overblown, and a lot of times people make it way more complex than it is. But a lot of times it's like, this is good for external APIs. If I'm gonna if my product is an API, yes, I want to use a hypermedia. But I'm making the case that for us, we're just using these APIs internally. We're building them for our own clients, right? Like we are API first in terms of, if we're going to build a new feature or something like that, we're going to build an API, and then we're going to have client side code communicate with the API. We're not going to do server side renders much. That's kind of, we're moving away from that. And I know, as the industry is like, shouldn't you do that, and tries to move back to it, whatever. I don't think so, obviously, because we're going the other direction. But it's valuable for us too. There's value when it's not an API product, when you're just consuming it yourself. We found it tremendously valuable. So
I realized what I was getting hung up on last week, as you were talking about
2 weeks ago.
Was it 2 weeks? Yes.
At least
so our last episode, which is just
maybe 3.
So if you are listening to the stream now, I doubt that you are. But if you go to devfridayshow.com, you can actually see or hear. This is here, but you could hear our latest episode from 2 weeks ago.
Bottleneck, yeah. It's actually 3 weeks ago is when we talked about hypermedia in 60 seconds, though.
Oh, it's 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was May 5th.
I thought it was before.
Apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I realized just yesterday what was my big hang up about that. Because I was like, when we were talking about it, I was like, I was giving you some pushback on, let's say, the bandwidth of, like, you're sending text back and forth, and that could be unnecessary. Is that really worth it? But now I realize what I was having my main questions about. Because when I think about an API, I think about it in a very general way. So when you're making an API, the client shouldn't really matter in a sense. So if it's a mobile client, like an iOS, Android, or if it's a web client, or if it's a TV app, right? The client shouldn't matter. But what you were talking about with just sending back links, what it was specific to a web client.
No, any client. You just follow the links.
No, but if you're going to be sending text links back to a native client on a device, the client then would have to know how to. But when you're sending links, are you just saying just URLs, or are you actually sending HTML?
No, URLs. Just URLs.
Just straight URLs. Okay.
Yeah. We're just saying, because instead of me having to describe my API like this, all right, we've got a collection of talks, and when you get back a talk, there's going to be a property that says user ID, and it's going to have the ID of the user. Well, then I also have to communicate to you, hey, if you have a user ID and you want to know more about that user, well, you'll take this URI base, you'll take /users/ and then you'll append that ID to that, and that'll give you the actual URI for the specific user, and then you can get information. I said, no. If I'm going to give you back the resource of a talk, inside of that is going to be a link, and that link is going to have an href, and that href is going to be /users/1234. You don't need to know what a user ID is. You don't have to have any idea. You just know that if you follow the link, that the key to that link is user, you're going to find the user that created that talk. So the only thing I have to describe and communicate and document between the server and the client is the actual shape of the responses. You have to know, yep, I know in this response there's going to be underscore links. I know that there is going to be, I could say this is required. It will always be there. There will always be an underscore links.user. And then that is going to lead me to the user who made this. And I know that.
I'm curious why you call it links then. Wouldn't just be like a URL or URI?
It's just what Hal calls it. Hal calls it links.
Oh, the standard. Okay.
Yeah. Hal calls it. Hal calls it either.
When I think a link, I think an anchor tag.
No, we're not shipping back HTML at all.
Or a link tag, depending upon how we know what.
We're not shipping back HTML at all. Okay. It's just saying in links is
because when you were when you were talking about last week, that's where my mind was going. It was like links. You're sending
it's just
transferring HTML back.
Yeah, it's a JSON link. In the context of JSON.
And the reason why I want to bring this up, because last night, I don't know how it came up, probably on Twitter, because where I find all this random information. I start to go down rat holes. Have you ever heard of HTMLX?
HTMLX?
Yes.
Not XHTML?
I got triggered last night when I saw this
What?
HTML.
I mean, you remember like XHTML. I don't even remember what
Yes.
that was, but like
the extensible
remember
HTML.
remember DHTML?
Yes.
I don't even remember
The
what
dynamic
DHTML is.
HTML. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, HTMLX. What is this now?
So, and
High-powered tools for HTML.
It's
Oh, is it HTMX or HTMLX?
I thought it was HTMLX, or maybe it's HTMX.
I see htmx.org, high-power tools for HTML.
No, it's HTMLX.
HTMLX.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it? What has triggered you, Mark? That's what we're here for.
Okay, so
only have
this
10
is a
minutes left,
new
but let
this
me
is a
see
new
if I can-
template. This is let me see if it's we're talking. So yeah, HTML. I'm sorry, HTMX. That's
one template to rule them all.
So it's a new web template that basically what is trying to do is saying, okay, we want to get rid of JavaScript. We don't want to have developers, front-end developers, write JavaScript anymore because we're going to use JavaScript to basically parse the HTML and make it dynamic using custom attributes, custom properties of the tags that are very specific to this library that you also are adding to your pages as a dependency. So this is basically a way of making a web page, an HTML web page, making it dynamic. So it could do server side or server requests, like API calls, requests within the attributes.
The actual HTML.
Yes, within the HTML, and then have that correspond to other HTML elements that then, so if you would say have a dropdown, you select an item from that dropdown, then when that selection of that value get passed then to an API, and then once the results get back, it'll then display those results in another HTML element below the dropdown. That's kind of a quick example of what I was trying to do. And you can do that all within attributes of the HTML tags. Don't have to write any JavaScript at all. And I was like looking at this, I was like, okay, I can kind of see, okay, the attributes that they're doing are kind of weird, but I can see the point of it. It does do some really interesting, quick, fancy demos, and I can kind of see the point of that.
Okay. This is like HTMLX on GitHub, right? Am I right here?
HTMX, yes.
HTMX or HTMLX?
It's HTMX, sorry. Yes. Now I'm looking at the website.
Oh, it's HTMX then.
I know, it's so confusing too. I know. I hate the name.
I just asking because HTMLX is like a single markdown file that was edited 4 years ago.
No, so HTMX.
Okay.
Yes. And it's an open source project.
Why should only A Inform be able to make HTTP requests?
So they're trying to extend HTML. And I do see the point of, because HTML has been pretty static as a structured language, hasn't changed too much since HTML5. I totally understand of thinking about developers wanting to extend it, wanting to make it have more options to use it, not just as a structured language to structure your content, but also to build in more interactive features.
So you're just saying you click this and it's just doing the old jQuery.
Yes.
Like load in DOM element trick.
So, and in order for this to work, you have to include its library. So it's basically just a JavaScript library.
Yeah.
So it's a JavaScript library so developers don't have to write JavaScript. And I'm like, I don't know. There's so many parts about that. I was trying when I was first reading about this and seeing. I went on YouTube.
I feel like
I saw
want to hate this. Like
I saw some videos. I saw the developer who made it. He did a talk about it, and I was trying to keep an open mind. I was trying to keep it on because I as a web developer, I'm also open to HTML definitely evolving, right? And but I do think it should be done in a good way, in a sense so the browsers are supporting. Also, I think it should evolve without the need of JavaScript, because I think once you start to I don't know. I like the separation of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They all kind of have there's a tool for the right job and how you.
Wait, are you saying that you kind of like the view as one layer, and then you like?
Well, not necessarily, because I do like patterns where, let's say, Svelte, which has a great implementation of basically making web components where you can have HTML, CSS, JavaScript in the same file. Same thing with React, with JSX. You can have your HTML, your JavaScript, even CSS if you want to style your components within it. What I'm doing right now, I'm working with the lit and web components, and I basically do the exact same thing. I'm putting my JavaScript, HTML, and CSS in one JavaScript file and kind of making a web component out of that. I don't mind that pattern at all. But when you start, let's say you have an HTML file, a .html file, and then you start to change it in such a ways with attributes or with your own tags, but then those attributes or your custom tags are dependent upon a library that you bring in. that's okay if, let's say, if it's your own domain specific solution you're trying to implement. I can kind of can see that could work within, let's say, within an application. But then you're gonna make a library they're gonna ask other developers to bring into their projects and then build their application around that. Because what I realized by the end, because you're requiring developers to learn this whole new pattern, this whole new library, this whole new set of, it feels like a DSL to me. Like it feels like it's a very specific language set that this other developer has made, and then you're asking other developers to bring this into their project, and then becoming dependent upon the project. Because going back to dependencies, Tim, that is the big thing I want to get away from. Of like, if I'm being asked to add a dependency in my project, I want to make sure that it makes sense or there's some good value to it. So I don't know. Yes, like I said, I got a little triggered by it, and it is interesting. And I do think it is showing some things. That's why one of the reasons why I like the lit.js as a web component library, and I'm getting away from React and working more with lit now, because what their goal with that framework is that they want to add features that build upon the default web component SDK that all the web browsers have, and to add small features to it that they expect or hope that would then be added back into the browser eventually.
Right. If that's the goal here, is that like,
and I do agree with that. So if they're trying to kind of show like a proof of concept saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if HTML could do this?
And what's great about this pattern, like what you can do with browsers is, like you say, you can throw in this on a page. It'll work.
Yeah.
Right. It'll work. And then you could say, well, look at this adoption. Now because it's a little, I'm playing with one of the demos right now. It's like from I don't do a lot of client side work, right? This to me is there's an appeal to a very simplistic way of doing this. Hey, I want to click on this button. I want to just replace this fragment. Again, that's stuff I used to do with jQuery all the time. Just hook that in and be like, all right, go grab this page and then replace this part of it. And that being native is an interesting concept. But like you say, I'm more interested in not if you're putting this out as, oh, here's the HTMLX library that you have to load in, and then does it actually work on all browsers? But if the goal here is, wouldn't it be nice if browsers adopted this?
Yeah. So I think as a design or proof of concept, I think that is super interesting. But then to actually build out real production applications, like I said, because you're adding this dependency, you are becoming relying on it, and like say the browsing compatibility of this, and also it is kind of, I don't know, about a lot about it. I was like, whoa, this
makes sense. And it's they're how to migrate from Hotwire, which is a kind of server side rendered, click this button, pull it. And
the reason why I asked about hypermedia, because that's what the developers are referencing, like going back to, because we talked about before, hypermedia has been around for a long time, and the ability to basically pass HTML, or let's say API requests, and have those API requests pass back HTML that then the browser could then consume and then to be rendered then on the page. There is a lot of value to that. That's why we were talking the previous week about hypermedia, that's where mine was going. I was like, oh, if you're sending links back and forth or anchor tags, okay, I can kind of see that. I do think, the server side hydration, where you're actually passing back, like say web components that have HTML and you're passing that back out to the client, I could see a lot of value in that. So he was talking about the fact that he was kind of using this HTMX as a sort of using the hypermedia model.
I think he maybe, I'm not digging it all the way, but yes, but that's not what hypermedia from an API standpoint generally is. Hypermedia from an API standpoint is, how are you, just using links in your APIs. Whereas they're talking about, like, I see also the reference to Hotwire, which is HTML instead of JSON, and sending HTML back, so you still maintain the server side render stuff. And it's an interesting concept.
It is, and I'm trying not to be triggered by it.
I can see it being kind of parallel to what I talk about in terms of API development, but my API development, I'm talking about shipping JSON down, just giving you links so you can follow it. So be interesting to see. I should probably dig into this a little bit though. So just to see how some of this works. The server side push looked interesting too. As a non-JavaScript,
and I agree. And some of the features that he's promoting or building into it, I do think are really super interesting. And if they do become a part of the HTML standard in the future, I think, I totally 100% support that.
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. Yeah.
But I hate JavaScript libraries that intend to just not have you write JavaScript.
I can see that, right? Because
in the end, I could do that myself.
Right.
And I have more control over it.
Right, because now you have to do it your way because it's not yours, but it's like this DSL that's built on top of HTML. So I can see that. So, all right. Next week, apparently. Is it the Mark Manifesto? Is that what we're gonna? Is that
the master plan will be revealed? Which I think because I know that a lot of people are looking for jobs now because a lot of people being laid off. I think that would be kind of interesting. We're gonna have like a job search show.
There you go.
I can lay out my master plan for the summer.
In Soviet Russia, job find you. All right, there we go. I don't
know what about that. Is it
you're still triggered. You're being triggered. Those watching the after show, he is still not able to let this go.
Oh, I don't know.
It's a different way of looking at applications, though, right?
It also has its own the attribute using two. I don't like that. He was like hx-post, hx-swap. Those are just two examples of attributes that he's using. Right. I don't mind like the data attributes. Like actually, those are cool. Like I think you do data dot video ID, or I don't know, data dot list, right? So, or I'm sorry, data dash. We put like the data dash.
Well, you can do. Name. It says it's worth mentioning. If you prefer, you can use the data dash prefix.
Okay. So if you could do that, then that's better. Because I also think that feels weird about you're just adding a whole new custom attribute that's very unique to this library, and I'm like,
I mean, it still would be data dash hx dash post.
Oh gosh, that's even grosser. I can't take this.
You are very triggered by this. To me, it's a different way to look at applications because the right now our mindset is build an application on the client side, and that's where from my perspective, it's very much doesn't matter TV, web, native, whatever. This thing runs there. It gets JSON data and it renders it to the user. Because it's a Vue app, it happens to do it using HTML, but it's HTML that's all managed client side. And you build an API and it doesn't care. This is saying, all right, we're building web applications and we're just allowing you to do more, which is novel and interesting, right? You can hit this button and I will post and the response will modify a subset of the page. That's cool. But let's be very clear. You are building a web application, which if that's what you're building, that's great. The advantage, the approach that I think is better gives us is one day when a user comes along and says, hey, everything I can do to manage whatever it is your web application lets them manage, I would like to do that automatically from my machine. You can say, cool, we have an API that lets you do it. This, you cannot say that. This, you have to say, well, we need to build the API separately. And if you're going to start breaking things down into these components of, I just want to update one particular thing. Well, why not? There's a reason why people have borrowed that, the API first model. And it's because let's just put it this way. It's not just because you had to do a full page refresh, because you didn't have to do a full page refresh. That was jQuery 101, was this pattern of post this data or get this data and replace, I forget what the jQuery thing was, but it was like replace the inner HTML of this. They had like a shortcut for it. It was like post and what you get back, shove in this DOM element.
And I wouldn't mind that too. If it's HTML can pass back, as long as it's performant, as long as you're not sending too much data back. I'm totally about that. Like, so if you want to have HTML that's basically not rendered, but like generated from a browser, send it back through an API call, even if it's, let's say, if you want to serialize it or something like that, I'm totally fine with that. I think that, and then have it rendered then through the client.
But still, from my perspective, is if I'm going to build that, and I'm going to build like little tiny controllers on the server that spit back fragments of HTML, why don't I just spit back JSON, and then that can be used by way more than web browsers?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, because API should be general, like it shouldn't be dependent upon the platform.
Yeah, because this isn't an API.
Yeah,
this is fragment generation. Yeah, which is, like I say, a different concept.
Unless in your API you did have it a request. That was one of the parameters that you asked for, saying, okay, the response back, give it to me in this format.
But that's still weird. At least it's weird to me because you're saying give it to me this in format. That's fine. I can give you a response in JSON. I can give you a response in XML, right? I could give you a response in
Yeah.
HTML. But HTML is presentation layer.
Mm-hmm.
XML is data. JSON is data, right? But HTML is presentation layer. So I'm giving you back something that assumes it knows what you're presenting it on. And that to me is no longer an API.
No, I agree. Like I said, I have less of an issue. I'm more open to the passing back of HTML if it makes sense. But I do prefer, just sending the data back so the data could then be represented then on the client based on the requirements of the client. That's the preferred way, because then you don't have the coupling of those two. It doesn't have to be too tight then.
Right.
Because then if you change your API, then you have to worry, am I changing my client? And it's kind of that's a whole mess. So.
Right. It's always, to me, feels weird unless it's a super tight application. But if it's like, I changed something on the server side and it impacted how the client looks, it shouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, in that paradigm of where API driven application, the web client is a web client, it's nice to have that separation. In this context, no, there's no separation, but that may work. I mean, you're building a simple to-do list app. Great. Go for it. Knock yourself out.
Yep.
There's reasons why, as things grow and the scale, in the complexity gets higher, we tend to decompose the problem into these compartments. There's reasons, right?
Yep.
And if you don't need them, this could be a great solution.
So
it's just going to be a solution that bothers Mark. So
true, and I need to get off this topic because it's raising my I'm getting some heartburn here. But yeah, the reason why I asked about Twitch, I do want to do. I think it would be cool. So
should we end the stream now? Should we not?
No,
not be
fine.
public about this?
No, you can. No,
because we gonna hook Twitch after this.
This is future plans for the show. Because I was thinking, because I'm thinking about doing a Twitch stream at night during the week.
That's what I was wondering. Are you going to start trying to build something?
Because I was realizing, as I was going through all my LinkedIn contacts, that's what I've been doing the past couple of weeks, and just like you, we know a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I haven't really talked to in a while. And also, I realized my students I talk to work for really good companies. And like, it would be really interesting just to reconnect with them and start chat with them. So then why not just do it like I'm doing with you, and do it like a sort of an office hours at night kind of like Twitch stream. And I'll ask you to kind of hop on with me too, just to kind of like just talk about things we're working on and things we're thinking about. So I'm going to be doing that. But that got me thinking about Twitch then. And and I was realizing other shows do Twitch, like the Peachtree Ugly guys. They do Twitch, don't they? They do. Or a lot of podcasts do Twitch. So I could just give you like the stream key or something like that, and could plug it in, and we could just use what you're doing right now. We'll do that.
Should be, yeah.
So okay, so but I do want to set up a separate channel for that. So I'll set up the channel. I'm not sure. We'll see if we'll do that for next week or the following week, and then
Twitch.
We'll start doing that. The other thing I was thinking about doing that could be interesting, I'm going to do a couple tests to see how long it would take me, because I also don't want to.
It looks like you might need to take whatever channel you have and make sure that I probably need to create a Twitch account, because it looks like the authorization wants me to log in.
Does it have to be through you?
I don't think so, but I think you may need to give me. I don't know. Can you share access?
Okay,
to
well,
I'll
take a look at it. I'll take a look to see what.
I'm pretty sure if you create a Twitch channel and like you add me as a collaborator or something.
Okay. So we're going to do that. And then also I'm going to do some tests to see how long this will take me. But I thought it'd be kind of interesting too, to take our previous shows and just download them. I don't have it, the video's backed up on YouTube, or does the Restream backup video, or is it just back up to YouTube? Just back to YouTube, go back to the previous shows, download them, and see if I could make like a clip, either clip certain segments or just do an edit, get like an hour show down to like 10 minutes or 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe even just clip it. Like maybe there was just one segment or one or two segments of the show that was kind of interesting, and then we just clip that and then repost that to, let's say, LinkedIn and maybe even YouTube, to kind of have like another kind of like a clip. Because I do think people like shorter. Our show's an hour. And I think it would be nice or be interesting to kind of give people like small little snippets, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Well, what would be great for that? Chapter support.
True.
On that.
And that is the last thing on the list too, which I'm working on now. Like I said,
I would love to do that.
And I think we talk about my project I'm working on now is my template that I'm working on, my serverless template that I'm hoping
Mhm,
will be a great template I could use for a lot of, like I said, our website for the Dev Friday show, or my
Oh yeah,
personal
because we didn't
website.
even get to talk about how somebody completely stole your sitebuild.io, I guess, right?
Oh, the design. Well, I always thought it was an interesting idea, but I always knew like all these, we talked with the companies like Webflow, Squarespace,
Yeah.
all these sites. It was just a matter of time, like for them to build in AI features. It was, they have to. And I was like, yeah, and I was like, I kind of didn't really want to go down that route, but I do like the idea of having what I'm thinking about now is like as a template, not a framework, but just a template that basically could have like 80% of the functionality that I need to get a website or a web app online on it's going to be to a specific platform. So I don't have to kind of do all that boilerplate initial kind of setup, initial configuration of the project, have that kind of already in place. And then you're just focusing on the front end, the client side, a little bit of maybe some of the functionality if it is unique. But if it's just let's say a blog website or a podcast website, they all share similar piece of functionality, just basically just the content in the front end. So setting up like that's what we're working on now, setting up kind of working on a template that I could then reuse for, my personal website, for Dev Friday show, for other like even my wife's or the website for us to sell her books on. So just to have a good kind of a template to kind of build off of that could also be utilizing something interesting, the whole serverless, if I could have this website be, or this web project be pretty much running from, let's say, a serverless Lambda function, which would also be kind of interesting, using that off of Amazon. So I'm also kind of playing with that.
I'm trying to get my Twitch account set back up.
So yeah, we'll do, I think Twitch will be really cool. So I think we actually will get more people watching the stream. I know the time of day is kind of weird, but I think there's a lot of people honestly who watch, because I've been following some developer streams on Twitch now, seeing what they've been doing.
Yeah.
And I think people just watch from work or if they're working from home, they just have it. Cause like the developer streamers, they're not doing too much. They maybe just, coding away, talking what they're working on. They have a few number of listeners when their shows. So I think we could actually get
So let me reset my password though. This is annoying.
Some people more to follow.
Yeah, like it's telling me what my username is, which I know, but it won't tell me my password. Well, we'll figure it out. And that whole build things in public thing could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're building that template and stuff, just streaming, hey, we're gonna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then with this,
because that's what most people are doing on Twitch, like developers on Twitch, they're just either personal projects or just stuff they're interested in. And they're just, working on it. And then if people could chime in to kind of, ask questions or, give feedback, I think that could be kind of interesting. Then the last thing, which I know pinged you and Anthony about.
What in the world? Oh, like
my only desire about that, I think I've mentioned to you, is like I joked around in the past about this show here. If we actually we were brought in like people to interview, and like he said, oh, that'd be too much work, and I agree with that.
Yeah,
but I think it could be kind of interesting too, thinking about what we did with Lehigh Tech from our meetings here. We could do online too, or just with the show format. Sort of like a three, just one person. Like say maybe we would just limit to, let's say, 3 people. Like say you and Anthony, and would invite somebody, or it would be you, me, and Anthony, or whatever you mean. We would have just kind of limit it, but then have one person come on that is, let's say, building something or is doing something interesting in a company, and just have like an interview. That could also be something that we could repost and kind of share around too.
Nope, Twitch won't let me. Twitch just said I've had too many password requests now. So
I wasn't intending that to then restart the whole meetups, but I do think that we kind of value that we to bring back the meetups and just.
Well, I've got people asking if we're going to restart them.
Well, I saw that happening too on LinkedIn, so that's why I was also but I didn't know.
Wait, somebody's asking on LinkedIn.
Well, people are still joining the LinkedIn group. For Lehigh Tech, yeah.
I didn't know there was a LinkedIn group.
I started, so I get pinged occasionally about that. Like once a week, I'll get like.
How am I not part of the Lehigh Valley Tech?
Are you not part of the LinkedIn group?
So no.
It doesn't have it only has like 150 compared to the meetup group. I know the meetup's like over like
Lehigh Valley Tech company
1,300, but
all right. Lehigh Valley Tech is a group.
So I was thinking, yeah, there's value. It would be kind of fun to maybe do like maybe I was thinking like once every couple months or once every 3 months or something like that. Do like kind of one big social media. That'd be kind of fun. But I think if we separate out the prep of like the presenters and only maybe do it more virtually as like as a podcast or as a what we're doing here.
Yeah, we'll see. It's like one of those things where I can see doing the meetup quarterly because I can't do monthly again.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I don't know that I could even swing another podcast monthly. So I'd be okay with, hey, let's try it quarterly
Mm-hmm.
and then see if we want to do it more frequently.
We could just try it one time this summer and just see how it goes.
Yeah, I do like the whole well, I don't know. I'll have to puzzle that one because yeah, like you're saying, you could bring in a presenter on the show that then would be the presenter for a meetup.
Yeah, they could just do a quick their normal 10-minute demo, and then the rest of the show would just be just a conversation.
It's just I'm not sure then. Like, does the one feed the other? It's like, does that do we do a couple of those and then that says, oh, like if we were doing the show every month, right? We'd have then 3 before a meetup, and that would be the 3 presenters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if we need to have the presenters then be at the meetup as an official presenter, but I was saying the meetups could just be more social meetups, just like the whole value of like just bringing people together face to face. I do think that would be kind of interesting. There's that was always the great value of the group, but I think the stress about the meetups was like you talked about, arrange the presenters,
find a presenter, get it all
making that all, which if we could do that virtually, maybe you could streamline a little more. And but then use it as the interviews or the online meetup. Not, they wouldn't be a meetup, but let's say the podcast or radio show, whatever you want to call it. That could be a marketing kind of avenue to bring people then to the meetups, right? We could post those video clips of the conversations, and then kind of to help market if you do want to do the in-person meetups again, which I wasn't, like I said, I'm not as, I do think it would be super interesting to do a interview format style with you and Anthony, I think, or the 3 of us, or whatever, how we would configure it. I think it would actually be kind of interesting, because I think when we did do the Lehigh High Tech radios, there were some interesting conversations that came out of that. Yeah. Especially when we brought guests in and talked to them. So I think if we brought a little bit of that back, I think that could be interesting. Yeah. I think, and then people would be kind of, if it was remote, let's say they just had to log in and to do it through their computer, I think it'd actually be easier to get guests too, be able to do it. Because we could get them for across, even though it is Lehigh Tech, we could just get people across the country too. We want to, Now it doesn't have to be just local, but I think we should start off local like we did, because I think there's still like people that probably we could interview, we can get, especially Anthony knows a lot of people with Ben Franklin now. So yeah. All right. But I don't know, like I said, maybe we wouldn't want to just try to do one this summer, see how it works, and then. Yeah, and still in my mind, I'm trying to wrap how they would feed to each other and like satisfy the people that are saying, hey, are we gonna ever restart the meetups? It'd be an interesting, just an interesting thing to try to figure out. So, but once I get my Twitch, I'm TJ Lytle on Twitch. So if you can figure out how to invite me to whatever you want to stream, I should be able then to add it to this. All right. But I still can't reset my password, so I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Oh, well. All right. All right. Got to get on my phone call. End the stream now. Those of you who watched all 18, almost 20 bonus